Hello everyone, I hope everyone is having a great day. Welcome to the channel. So today I have a pretty fun project that I'm going to start working on. I was out at our farm the other day and I was digging through scrap pile. We've got a area that's kind of like everything gets tossed into it. It's kind of the scrap pile, burn pile, slash throw everything. Let's see what we can find in the catch-all junk pile today. Some 4x4 posts, some treated landscaping timbers. Watch out for nails. What do we got over here? And I got lucky and I found something that I think I want to try to make something out of. Let's take a look. So I found an old oak 6x6 post. It was probably used as a corner post for a fence or a gate out at the farm, and the bottom eventually rotted off. So threw it in the burn pile and there it sat. I think it's still pretty solid, still pretty usable. It's got a split area here on the end that I'm going to have to probably pour some epoxy in to kind of get it to sturdy it up. But the $1,000,000 question, and it's got a crack that runs down the length and a soft spot here that I'll probably fill with epoxy too. But it's still pretty heavy, so that means to me, messing with a lot of old oak, it means it's still got a good core, so I can still use it. So the first thing that I would like to do is just try to figure out what do I want to do with it. I thought, man, some of this stuff I'll cut up and I'll turn into frames. Some of this stuff I will use as legs for maybe a table or a bench. Those things probably not going to work with this. The way that it's split, I don't really want to rip it down into frame material. It's not really long enough to make too many legs. I can make some kind of accent piece or something with it. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up the edges all the way around. I'm going to cut off the bad end, and then I'm going to slice it up into pieces, and I'm going to make an end grain cutting board, except with not using small pieces, but I'm going to use these large pieces, which this is a 6x6 post, but it's 5.5 by 5.5. So the first thing we need to do is get the metal out of it. There's a staple here, staples on the other side. I already pulled some nails out of it just to get it in the truck, and we'll get the metal out of it, and we'll get a hand plane and work on cleaning it up. And I would like to use hand tools, maybe a handsaw, to do all my slicing with. We'll see how that goes, and see how this turns out. Let's go. So like I was saying, the first thing that I need to do, and the first thing you should do when you're messing with barn lumber, is checking for metal. If it is real true barn lumber, it's actually been out, used for decades or a century, it's most likely got metal in it. We didn't have screws. They didn't have screws back then. They used a lot of nails, tacks. This was a corner post for a fence, so it's got wire staples in it, hand staples. So I would invest in one of these. I think I showed it in another one of my videos, but they're relatively inexpensive compared to the cost of running a blade or messing something up. So I would invest in one of these if you're going to be messing with barn lumber very much. So those two staples are all I'm detecting, so I'm gonna pull those out and we'll get started on getting it cleaned up. All right, so I know this might seem sacrilegious to some barn lumber aficionados, but I'm not terribly concerned about the patina of the outside. This is going to be an in-grain type stuff that I'm going to be using. So the slice at the end of the slices is what I'm going for here. Using a wire brush is a good place to start when you're cleaning up barn lumber. It actually keeps the barn lumber patina, plus it kind of cleans it up and gets a lot of the gunk and the dust and stuff off of it that's on the outside that's been collected for years and years. So I did find a little termite homage there in the end. So I might do, after I clean up the edges, I might do an experimental cut up a few inches to kind of see how far the damage, because that's not a real pretty grain like I was hoping it would be, but I'd be willing to bet when I work my way up just a little further, it cleans up a little bit. We shall see. So this is actually one of my favorite barn lumber patinas, is to take a hand plane and just clean it up a little bit and leave some of the grain, the gray spots that are a little bit deeper, leave them intact, clean it up, and there's kind of a contrast between what you would think of as the typical oak grain showing with the older patina kind of showing through. And I don't know if you can see it on camera or not, but when I started cleaning this up, you can actually see that this was cut originally in a sawmill with a circular blade. You can see the kerf marks going up the blade in a circular manner. Just keep working our way around. The next thing I'm going to do is do some epoxy mixing. I might go ahead and cut off another maybe 2 inches down here just to see what it looks like. But I'm going to do some epoxy mixing to stabilize some of these cracks. That way when I start slicing it, it doesn't come apart. This is a pretty major crack here too that I'm going to work on stabilizing. So that'll be the next thing. All right, so I've got 3 pours worth of epoxy in this main crack here to stabilize it. So I'm going to take the painter's tape off and look it over real good, and I might cut about a ½ inch off this to look at the end and see how the end is, and then we'll see what else we need to pour to stabilize it, or if we might be able to just go ahead and start slicing it up. I'm not sure yet. Let's take a look. So I was watching a video somebody made about a certain kind of tape that you had to use to hold this epoxy back when you're doing stuff like this. But as you can see, this blue painter's tape, which I use the good stuff, it's the duct tape brand, but it held back that epoxy just fine. As long as you get it taped up good, it'll hold it back just fine. think it's actually kind of interesting to see how some of these cracks are connected. So this is the main crack that I had started my pour, so it was on top. It had a four-way split here, so I knew it was going to fill up this bottom, and depending on how much I poured in here, I knew it was going to fill up here. So it worked its way back to about right there is where that crack stopped, and then worked its way back on this crack here. And I think my tape was actually leaking here a little bit. I didn't tape it good enough, but it didn't get so far as to above that knot. And then on the bottom, if I can roll this thing over, so this is the bottom aspect, and it got back to about right there, but this other crack was not connected. And it's fairly similar on the other end too. All it did was fill this one little void here. Didn't work itself back any there, or on the bottom at all. So I think now, still have a little bit of tape on here, but I think I'm gonna cut about a ½ inch back and clean this edge up and see what it looks like. So that end cutoff piece there looks pretty cool. Looks pretty neat. Here I'm continuing with my stabilizing pours, and this is very time consuming. I actually cut out a lot of this footage because I'm not trying to bore you guys to death. I'm trying to show you how much work this project actually put to do. So there's 4 sides to this, and I probably poured 3 different pours on each side individually and sanded in between. So that's about 12 different pours that I did to get this thing stabilized before I even started the next process. So let's see how good it did. Just a little bit of a crack there. It's soaked down in. I think we'll sand that down. Go ahead and fill this side too. here I'm starting my cuts with a fine-tooth, thin curved blade that just happens to be a hacksaw blade in this case. And you'll see later the reason I'm doing this. I'm going to be using a more aggressive saw blade later, and this will help keep it started, keep the blade started in the right spot, to keep myself square and to keep it going down the blade going down the lines the correct way. So no, I do not plan on cutting every one of these slices with the hacksaw. But what I was doing is I laid out my marks. I want my slices to end up being, on the finished product, I want my board to be about a little over 2 inches. So I marked them about 2 5/16. I'm going to have a little takeaway from the blade width of the cut. I'm going to hand cut these, but with a better saw. And then whenever you get it all laid out, you run a planer, not a planer, you run a router over the top of them. So you run a leveling bit or a flat router bit over the top of the whole project to get the surface all one level. So I have epoxy poured onto all 4 sides to help stabilize it, so when I do slice it up, any of the structure that was loose before that might come apart in pieces, hopefully will be held together a little bit better. So I'm going to start with these here, and then I'm going to cut them with a better saw and see how we turn out. I ended up making 3 different boards out of this post. I made a small 2x2, a 2x3, which is the one that I'm making this video out of, and I ended up making a larger 3x4 board out of this post. And something happened with my computer and my storage, and I ended up losing the footage of me cutting the segments off the post to make the 2x3 out of. So I'm showing you me cutting the slices for me making the larger board. So this might seem like a pretty simple process, but this is exactly, it's kind of hard to see, but I started to kind of cut at a little bit of an angle here, and it started to go that way. So this is why I was trying to groove all the way around, so when I use the more aggressive saw, it stays in the grooves. These are not doing too bad, but this one here started to get a little bit out. So this is why I was actually going for a little bit larger thickness. That way I knew I would have a little leeway in the thickness whenever I level them later, because of goof ups. I'm using 2 different saws to do this process with, one of which is a finer tooth, and it's actually a old miter box blade saw, and then the other one is a more aggressive regular crosscut saw. I'm using the miter box saw to get it started. It has a lot more rigidity to it, so it cuts straighter, plus it has finer tooth. So getting the cut started, it has a tendency to want to stay straighter and stay with the lines. And this is a more aggressive saw, actually makes better progress with actually cutting down into the post. Once again, I lost footage of the glue up also of the 2x3 board, so I'm showing you the process that I use for the glue up on the 3x4, which is basically the same process that I use for each. A lot of these pieces didn't fit together real good, like a puzzle, so I'm having to square up each connecting edge so it lines up and fits a lot better. So when I do the glue up, I'm ensuring that there's a good connection there. So I realized that my edges were not quite straight, so I need to straighten them because I'm going to put clamps on them with these boards along the edges, and I need a nice straight edge so when I clamp, the clamping pressure stays equal across the whole length of the sides. So I'm having to square up these edges.
Now we wait.
I honestly don't remember how long this sat for, but I know this sat for over 48 hours before I had time to come back over to the shop and break it down and do another part of the next part.
Good enough.
I'm not going to explain the epoxy mixing process that I go through here. I do have another video in my library that I'll leave the link in the description if you're interested in knowing how I mix up my epoxy. I have a whole video on that. I'd suggest you just go watch that. It's pretty descriptive, and that'll kind of help you know how I mix my epoxy for this stuff. This is a flat bottom router bit. When you do this, just be prepared to make the biggest mess of any job that you can do in your workshop. This makes the biggest mess of all of them. Can't see it, but there is literally sawdust and stuff from the chips from the wood everywhere. Here I'm just adjusting my router bit out just a little bit to go a little bit deeper on the next cut. One little spot right here I didn't hit. So it probably wouldn't hurt to go a little lower, but I might still be able to sand that down. So I'm going to spare you guys from having to watch what all I had to do to finish this board out. I crammed over about 50 minutes of clips down to about 45 seconds here to make it kind of bearable to watch. But I think I poured epoxy and sanded back and forth like 12 more times. That's about 6 per side. And then I had to do a couple on the edges. This was extremely time consuming. And for what it's worth, I had 133 clips for this whole project that I had to hold. To those of you who made it this far into the video, I appreciate you watching. Thank you very much. This was a fun project. I wasn't exactly sure. I did all this recording, but I wasn't exactly sure that it was going to turn out. And I'm pretty proud of the way that it did. It took a long time. It took like 5 months in total to make this board. I had to do a lot of cleaning out of areas that were kind of rotten, and I backfilled with the epoxy in different places, but I think it turned out pretty good. The sucker's pretty solid. It's over 2 inches, like 2 1/8 inch thick. It weighs like 15 pounds. The bigger one, the 3x4, is huge. But I appreciate you guys watching. I'm trying to build up my channel. I would appreciate if you guys gave me a thumbs up. If you made it this far, thumbs up. It's not a difficult thing to do. It doesn't cost any money on your side to do this. It costs lots of time and money on my side to make stuff like this. So I appreciate a thumbs up. A comment is always good. Sharing the video, and of course, I'd really appreciate you subscribing. And I'll see you guys on the next one.